Welcome back to the Beast Gang Podcast. We're going to be reviewing Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Fantastic Beasts was directed by David Yates. He had previously done several entries in the Harry Potter series. It's written by JK Rowling, who created Harry Potter. It stars Eddie Redmayne as Newt Scamander, Catherine Watson as Tina, Alison Suttle as Queenie, Dan Fogler as Kowalski, and Colin Farrell as Graves. Redmayne has been in My Week with Marilyn, which was good, The Theory of Everything, which I liked, The Danish Girl, and another favorite of Keith's, Jupiter Ascending.
Yep.
Still don't see what you like about that movie. Waterston has been in Boardwalk Empire. Suttle has been in Transparent. Fogler has been in Kung Fu Panda, Horton Hears a Who, and the worst movie of 2007, Balls of Fury.
That movie was it was so bad.
And lastly, Farrell has been in Phone Booth, 2003's Daredevil, 2012's Total Recall, and A Terrible Season of True Detective. Summary: the adventures of writer Newt Scamander in New York's secret community of witches and wizards, 70 years before Harry Potter reads his book in school. Keith, do you want to give an overview?
Newt arrives in New York and he basically is carrying a case full of these creatures in his magical suitcase. When he gets there, there's another element going on. The wizarding community in America is basically facing a threat of exposure because of some recent disturbances in the area that are widespread and large enough that they're being detected by the normal humans. They call them nomad. In England, they call them muggles, but in this case, they call them nomads or non-magical humans. And in that first third, it kind of shows how different America is in terms of how to treat non-magical citizens.
And let me just make one point. It seems to be in 1926 when this takes place.
Another element that's popping up is that there's a movement by a woman who is taking care of orphans on the streets, and basically her movement is to stamp out witchcraft because she believes there are witches in the world. That's when we are introduced to the other lead character in this movie, Tina, played by Catherine Waterston. So basically, as the plot progresses, Newt bumps into this public rally for against witchcraft that's out there. Most people think she's crazy, but Newt gets there and she's singled out. One of his creatures escapes and bumps into a gentleman named Kowalski.
So, Keith, what is your overall impressions?
Overall impression was that it had good special effects for the most part. The acting was okay. In terms of other Harry Potter movies, it was probably the worst of the lot, and that the plot was completely convoluted. It was all over the place. It tried to do way too many things, and the tone of the movie was way too serious for kids. I mean, it's PG-13, but it honestly, I don't think it's for 13-year-olds.
I'm gonna just say this, that we were in a movie theater. Keith turned to me, it's like, this is not a kid's movie.
It's not a kid's movie at all. Girl Tina, she's got a sister, Queenie, she's unconscious of her looks.
And she's very flirty.
I mean, I'm not a prude, and I'm not prudish in any way, shape, or form. This is supposed to be a movie for kids, and they got stuff like this where they're openly flirting, flirtatious like that, and the innuendo is clear that it was about sex.
All right, Keith, calm down.
Character deaths.
Come off your morality horse right now.
So, what's that?
Say, come off your morality horse right now. But what
morality? It's not morality horse. It's like basic filmmaking, man. If you if you're going in there with a movie for kids, you don't throw sex and just gratuitous violence like that out there like that.
All right, but do you have any other impressions?
The storyline was a hot mess.
My thoughts about this are that I've only seen 4 of the Harry Potter movies. I saw the second one, whatever one Alfonso Cuarón had done, and the last 2 movies. The beginning needed to move a lot faster. The movie is basically just a lot of spectacle and no substance. New York looks good. There's some issues with the CG. It looks great at times and not so much at other times. It's a Harry Potter version of Pokemon and Yokai Watch. To kind of echo one of your points is that I'm not sure if I actually understand everything that had happened in the movie. Let's just talk about Eddie Redmayne as Newt Scamander, and how did you feel about him?
Basically I won't say he put too much into the character and trying to play him, but there were like several times I didn't understand half of what he was saying. he was just and
Well,
he
I remember
invested in the
you made
role,
that
but I
comment.
couldn't understand what he was talking about half the time.
I
Is this
remember you
supposed to
made
be a series too? They're trying to make this like another
Yeah, they're
No,
making 3 movies.
no, it's gonna be 5 movies. But
5.
5?
yes.
Oh God.
So I remember Keith mentioned that when he saw the trailer, he's like, I don't understand anything that he's saying because he's kind of meandering through his dialogue. It is also not enunciating correctly.
I don't know anything about this. So I mean, I wonder, is the character like that, or he just decided to put like his own little spin?
Well, the thing that someone mentioned to me when I told him I was going to go see this movie is that this book is actually just an encyclopedia of things that may occur in the Harry Potter universe.
Yeah, so basically, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them was Rowling wrote the book, but she made the author Newt Scamander. And there was a little bit of background about him and who he was and what was going on that he talked about in the book. But basically, it was designed as just a basic encyclopedia, just to kind of talk about what was going on out there in the world. And she just wrote the book as this guy writing about various magical creatures in the world. This movie was basically, they wrote a story surrounding the kind of end of his journey after he's done his manuscript about what's going on in there. So that's where this came from. So it's an original story that hasn't been told. Problem is that this story doesn't really fit into what, like, the original Harry Potter movies was all about this threat of Voldemort, and who was the heir to Slytherin, who is just a dark wizard and they believe that wizards should rule, and everyone else non-magical shouldn't be, and it should be second class or slaves to them. That's straightforward. It makes sense. And in this case, they built up, and this right from the very beginning, like right in the intro, they build up not a minor character, but a kind of a secondary villain as the precursor to who Voldemort was. Someone named Grindelwald. And like I said, Barry, you saw the last 2 movies, so you heard mention of him
Yes,
in those
and
last
those
2
were
Harry
actually
Potter
pretty
movies.
good movies. Again, I'm not really into Harry Potter. Obviously, I saw the one that Alfonso Cuarón did because I'm a fan of his directing, but the last 2 were actually pretty good movies.
Yeah, they were good, and they actually segue pretty well into what they were doing with this. And basically, Grindelwald was a dark wizard who is looking for the same thing that Harry Potter ended up looking for, the Deathly Hallows. Basically, you get the same feel. Grindelwald is doing the same thing that Voldemort was doing and his followers were doing, and that was running around causing mayhem for whatever purpose you don't know. In the case of Voldemort, he was doing this to expose everything and exerting his power. So in this case, in the case of Grindelwald, it's like they want to build up this new threat and this new kind of series as a new threat, but it's told in a very adult manner, whereas the other Harry Potter movies were fun because they were more like there was a sense of innocence. The last 2 movies were dark and darker because the subject matter of what they were going through was very dark.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like at the end of that, it made sense because the actors were all older. They weren't kids anymore. And, this was kind of like this real life thing that happened. But there were moments of brevity that fit in with that because they were still young people. They were still young. They were still doing that. So, Harry Potter was still a 17-year-old kid out there. And basically, he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. But at the same time, he was still a kid, and it was told from that perspective. In this case, this is all adults. And it was just the brevity that they kind of force fed into it was just that. It felt forced. I mean, the only thing that kind of lightened the mood was Kowalski, and that in this case, it was his perspective of the wizarding world, and it was all magical and crazy creatures and that the insane things that they were doing. He was kind of shocked, and his reactions to it were pretty humorous.
Yeah, I will say, because we should probably just move on to other characters, but I will say that I like the dynamic between him and Scamander, that duo work well.
Yeah.
Kowalski is supposed to be like
That's Ryan
non-magic,
Fogler.
non-magic guy. So he's like, what they call them, muggles or something like that?
Well, they call them nomads. Yeah.
I thought I'm okay.
Well, that's what they call them in America.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there's kind of like this thing where it's like America versus England. So there's like, hey, there's Hogwarts and whatever the American equivalent to it is, and there's kind of like a rivalry with that. But what do you think of Catherine Waterston's character, Keith?
She was completely annoying. Like, in point of fact, I was kind of wishing she'd die. All right.
Damn, man.
I mean, like, okay, so James, you watch. Here you go. So how you watch a movie, a horror movie or something, and one of the actors or actresses just does something stupid just to move the story along. It was like everything she did was completely stupid and it made no sense.
Yeah, it's like she
And
wasn't actually helping things. She was making things worse. But go ahead, Keith.
Really?
She had zero redeeming value. Her sister Queenie had more redeeming qualities.
So,
Carbon,
she was that bad.
they got into a situation where she's chasing them. She's an ex-aura,
Mm-hmm.
because that's in the description of the character. So
And
she's an
why don't you go ahead and
ex-aura,
explain some
and
of the terms, Keith?
what's that? Well, so an aura is basically a magical police officer.
Okay. All right.
So she used to be an R. She's no longer one. They go into why she's no longer one in the movie, but it's clear she wants to get back into it, and she's driven by her former duties that she is still doing investigations and stuff. And in this case, she hits upon that Newt is dangerous and he's doing something wrong, and what he's doing wrong may be impacting what's happening in the city. So she brings him to justice, and when she does so, it ends up exploding in her face, and you're kind of like sitting there like, of course that was going to happen.
Yeah, so
Right.
basically people don't believe her and they just like go back to your job.
Yeah, and then she does it again.
Okay.
So it's like the first time it happens, they say go back to your job. We don't care about this.
Well, let me just chime in a little bit. I didn't think she was that bad. Keith is taking a little bit, I wouldn't say harsher tone, but he's a little bit more invested in this series of Harry Potter and what seems to come after that.
I had to defend myself on that because I actually didn't think this movie was going to be that good in the first place.
All
Like I
right.
said, I saw the trailer and I thought it was going to be shit. I come to movies to hopefully be pleasantly surprised by it.
Well, let me just go on, but I think she was serviceable in the movie. So let's talk about her sister Queenie and what did you think of her? Aside from the fact that she's not for the kids.
Yeah, pretty much. Had they toned down, and I'm not going to blame the actress or the character or anything like that. So aside from that little reverse striptease that she did, I thought she was actually a good character because she was extremely unique. She could read minds. There's a skill called Legamins. She could basically read minds. And hers is like a particular gift, and she's particularly strong in it. So she's always doing it. She was a good character, and she was actually unique to the Potter universe because she had that quirky nature that kind of set her off out of the norm as kind of being the oddball, but it worked. And like I said, I liked the character. And
Yeah, I'll say the same thing that I thought her character was pretty good. Let's talk about Graves, which is played by Colin Farrell.
Graves is I don't even know what his rank is, but he's pretty high up in the Magical Congress. So the interesting thing about that is that he seems to be in charge of the auras that are assigned there. So he's investigating the disturbances that are going on, but there's a twist involving a couple characters that you see coming because if you paid attention to the first 2 minutes of the movie, it kind of reveals itself. But in this case, Colin Farrell's character is actively seeking out the source of the disturbance. Now I thought Colin did a decent job of what he had with the material he had. He didn't have a whole lot to work with. I mean, the characters seemed pretty one-dimensional in that regard, and most of the focus seemed to be on our four heroes as opposed to the villains.
Yeah, because I will just say that they spent a lot of time explaining Eddie Redmayne's motives, and then Colin Farrell's character was slightly underdeveloped. That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And he was like, honestly, I don't even think there was much to develop with that character because, I mean,
It's just
I don't
slightly
know,
one dimensional to me. It's just like you
yeah.
knew where his character was going just because the story told you that. The way that the story goes on, there really wasn't that much of a point for Colin Farrell, the actor, to be in this movie.
Mhm.
So, Keith, last question. How do you feel that this fits into the Harry Potter universe?
There was no talk in the actual Harry Potter universe about the events that took place in Fantastic Beasts. It's like a story that was never told or never even thought about, and it's kind of
So,
feels like it's being shoehorned in.
so what you're trying to
They
say that they're retconning history into Harry Potter?
not retconning because basically the characters are there. Like Newt Scamander he was in the books and he was known as an author who studied magical creatures. Grindelwald he was a famous dark wizard that Albus Dumbledore, who was well known in the Harry Potter universe, is his chief rival. It feels like that this is where it's leading to. The next movie is probably going to introduce the younger Albus Dumbledore and their confrontation, so to speak.
So let's do this. We're going to go ahead and provide some wrap up thoughts and then provide a score. So, Keith, go ahead.
I don't want to say that this was an unnecessary movie because, I mean, there's a lot to explore in the Harry Potter universe. The author, JK Rowling, walked away from it at first, but I mean, it's clear that there's a lot more, not just money wise, monetary wise, there's a lot more to do in this world, kind of like how Tolkien did with his Lord of the Rings. The problem here is that she's kind of backfilling. But in terms of this movie, just evaluating on its own, it was too all over the place. It should have been stuck with the whole magical creatures things and this introduction of, I can't even pronounce the name of what it was called in the end. Nothing like that had ever been dropped or heard about before. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And it honestly wasn't like this. Harry Potter had already had their big bad, and that was kind of like Voldemort was supposed to be the worst of the worst, and kind of seeing what came before him is kind of like who kind of cares at this point. So my thoughts are, like I said, it's a movie that didn't need to be made, but glad they're trying to expand more in the universe. But in this case, if it's going to be more of the same, like of this kind of quality, then they
let
should
me
just
make
stop.
an app comparison. So, do you feel like this is Star Trek Enterprise to the Star Trek universe, where they are just trying to dole out some more stories to things that have already happened?
Yes and no. Star Trek Enterprise, like I was excited for that because there was a ton of stuff that, to put it this way, the world building had already been done for Enterprise. So those great events that were supposed to happen, those are the things you were watching Enterprise to see how it plays out. In this case, it's kind of like what happened in New York during this stage. It's never talked about. It's just not talked about. Like they should have just stuck with the magical creatures and not done all the back end wizarding politics that were going on. It kind of just went over my head. Well, not even over my head. It didn't seem to fit. So it wasn't my favorite. I put it at the bottom. So I give this movie out of 10. I'll give it a 6 because I like the look and I like the special effects, but it's a 6 and I doubt if I will watch it again.
So with me, I thought the movie was a little too sappy at times. It's another movie where the creature or villain is an undefined mass of nothing. The ending basically wraps up too neatly and then goes on for way longer than it should.
Yeah.
Steve was like, it's like it's like ready to go.
I was ready to go, man. I was done.
All right, so there will be more movies. As I said before, there's supposed to be 5, so they're going to milk the hell out of this. I hope the second one is better. And I also had problems with the cameo. I will also give this 6 out of 10. It's okay, but I'm not as invested in the Harry Potter universe as other people. I can appreciate it. That's the Beast Game Podcast. You can find more of our podcasts at beastgame.com, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Twitter, and YouTube.
The movie isn't for kids.